Hi, welcome to Believe in Clemson Football. I'm Will Vandervoort. That's Alex Dodd. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Had a little bit of technical difficulty getting in. And when I say technical difficulty, I think it's more people can't drive where Alex lives. And so the technical difficulty was on them.
we had almost 2 feet of snow a week ago, and I guess people still can't drive after that. So I don't know. Lingering effects of the snow.
Yes, and so, but anyway, Alex, like I told you before, I'd rather you get home safely. That's more important. The show will go on. We just want you to be a part of it. So don't worry, don't get yourself hurt trying to rush to get the show going. So anyway, appreciate you being here, buddy. I'm glad you made it home safely, and we're on air now, and we appreciate all the folks out there, all the Clemson fans out there watching and listening to us, and all the good stuff that goes on. And big win last week, Alex, for Clemson. It was good to see the Tigers play the way they did. When you look at this team and how this year's been, that was a game I think a lot of people didn't know what was going to happen because they're going into a hostile environment at Virginia Tech. You're coming off that just horrible performance against Louisville, and people didn't know where the team's head was going to be, where their headspace was going to be. What we found out is that Dabo Swinney knows how to get his team ready to play and knows how to coach football. That's what we found out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it may have taken 2 quarters to get everything moving in the right direction. But once it did, it was clear that, Clemson was a better football team, the more prepared football team. I think that was even clear in the first half that Clemson was the more prepared football team. It just didn't result in points and actually resulted in 7 for Virginia Tech. But it was a good sign for Clemson. I think, like you said, a lot of fans went in with no expectations this weekend because after what they saw at night in Death Valley for the first time in 11 years, they saw a product like that. Expectations got pretty low, but I think Clemson did a good job bouncing back.
Absolutely, they did, and we're going to get into all that. We're going to talk about the rest of the Clemson, rest of that game, and kind of go over some of the things Dabo said today about that as well. Dabo Swinney will be joining us just a little bit later. Also, we're going to look at Clemson's defense, as we mentioned, what they looked like the other day. We're going to talk about this guy named Sammy Brown. He's a pretty good football player. He knows football. Also going to talk about how the Tigers need to get a little bit better on offense, as well as what Clemson's path to the ACC championship is. There is a path now, thanks to Georgia Tech. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. And then we'll also preview this week's game at Pittsburgh. But I want to go ahead before we do anything, and I want to go ahead and give our sponsors, the Clemson Insider, a shout out, the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting. Go on over to the ClemsonInsider.com. Clemson Insider always allowing us to use their Facebook page, their YouTube page, everywhere you can find us on the internet. We're there, and we appreciate Robert and the gang over at the Clemson Insider for helping us out as always. Also, don't forget that you can get Believe in Clemson Football on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on SiriusXM, wherever you get a podcast. You can find Believe in Clemson Football. This podcast is going live right now. We're streaming it on YouTube and Facebook and on X. But later on, I'll have it up on the Believe Network, and that's where you can stream it and find it wherever you do your podcast. So anyway, but remember, go to the Clemson Insider for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting. By the way, just do a little bit of news stuff first. I mentioned Sammy Brown earlier. We'll go into this a little bit, named ACC Rookie of the Week and Linebacker of the Week for his performance, where he had 8 tackles. Double dipper, yeah. First one, I think the first double dipper of the year for Clemson, to be honest with you. 8 tackles he had in that game, that win over Virginia Tech. He had 2 tackles for a loss and a sack. We'll get into that in a little bit about what he meant to that Clemson defense. Also, it was announced today, and me and Alex are huge baseball fans, and we're Clemson baseball fans, and we're Eric Backage fans. So the Clemson Tigers will start their 129th season this year. 128th season this year.
Getting ahead of yourself.
With Eric Package leading the way.
Hopefully he's still leading the way in the 129th season.
The year starts, the 2025 season starts with 3 games in the Shriners Children's College Showdown in Arlington, Texas from February 14th to 16th. Clemson's home opener is against Presbyterian College at Doug Kingsmore Stadium on February 19th. That will be a 4 p.m. start. The Tigers open the season by playing Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Ole Miss in Arlington, making their first regular season games outside of the Eastern time zone since 2005. Clemson and South Carolina square off in a 3-game series beginning February 28th at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. The two teams then play again the following day at Fluor Field in Greenville before concluding the series in Columbia on March 2nd. The two rivals will have met 335 times when that series begins. After returning to Fluor Field for a game against USC Upstate on March 4th, the Tigers play their next 15 games at home during a 20-day stretch. How about that, Alex? That's a lot of home games.
It's nuts. You look at that schedule, you see a lot of games listed in orange.
You
a
do.
lot of stuff happening at Doug Kingsmore to make that's up always that neutral series at the beginning of the year.
Exactly. Later in the season, they'll play 2 ACC members, Stanford and California, for the first time. The Tigers have 5 ACC home series against Notre Dame, Wake Forest, Stanford, Louisville, and Duke, while Clemson's road series are at Georgia Tech. Got to go to California, NC State, Florida State, and Pittsburgh. The Tigers do not play Boston College, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, and Virginia Tech during the regular season. Wow. So basically, Alex, they're not playing Miami, North Carolina, and Virginia, all 3 powerhouses in college baseball. Clemson does not have to worry about going there. That's something else right there.
Yeah, that's a good break. But, I mean, again, you talk about the strength of schedule with this team having to open up in Arlington, which I will be there.
There you go.
With Oklahoma State or Ole Miss, Arizona. Those are 3 powerhouse programs in their own right.
Yes, they are.
So probably a little helpful. You get to dodge a couple of the ACC powers to deal with that, and you got to play Stanford in there too,
right?
In the home series, another ACC power.
That is true. A baseball power. That is a baseball power as well. The ACC baseball tournament, by the way, will be. Sucks to be Stanford and Cal and SMU. Will be in Durham, North Carolina, May 20th to the 25th. Wow, got to go all the way across country to play a baseball series, a baseball tournament. That stinks to be those guys. But hey, they knew what they were signing up for when they did it. So anyway, there's your Clemson baseball news. As we're speaking here in about 25 minutes, Clemson men's basketball team will play their 3rd game of the season. The Tigers right now are 2-0. Off to a 2-0 start. I was there for the season opener for Brad Brownell and his Tigers. They got off to a good start, got a big win, and then did it again last Friday night. Really took care of business and are now off to a 2-0 start to the season. Probably going to get to 3-0, you hope, because they're playing Eastern Kentucky. They should do it. Got a big road series, though, this weekend at Boise State. Big road game, I should say. So that's going to be Alex, to come to your neck of the woods, basically. I mean, a little bit further from where you're at, but still. They're coming over there to the snow and everything.
Well, I mean, it's a big showdown for Clemson. It's also a big showdown for the ACC. If you remember last year, certain people in the national college basketball media created this narrative, which turned out to be false, that the Mountain West was this, upstart power conference and the ACC had fallen back. But I think the ACC's proven that in the last few years that it hasn't fallen back in the basketball ranks. But this is a big series or a big game on the road for Clemson, going to the Mountain West to play a really good Boise State team. It's a game that didn't come too easily for Clemson when Boise State came to Clemson and played in Littlejohn last year. I like the mid-major home and home in basketball. I hate it in football. I like it in basketball, especially when you're fighting this national perception that for some reason has been around for a few years, that your conference has slipped a little bit in recent years.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, and we'll have this in a little bit. But yeah, the national perception of somehow the ACC sucks and everything now. And Dabo was asked about why certain conferences can have their top team lose to somebody and play horrible, and everything's hunky-dory. Everybody's going to the college football playoff. You get to go to the college football playoff. You get to go to the college football playoff. You get to go to the college football playoff, and you get to go to the college football playoff.
It's like Oprah.
But in the ACC, it's like, well, we don't even want their champion to play in the college football playoff. The ACC is horrible. And it's like, what in the world is going on? Like, why is the perception? And then basketball is getting the same perception now, which is the premier basketball conference. It's the SEC of basketball, if you will, if we want to go there. And yet everybody acts like the ACC sucks in basketball all of a sudden now. Last year, Clemson and Miami and all, I mean, not Miami, but Clemson and them proved them wrong. NC State proved them wrong again. And I'm sure this year they'll be proven wrong again. That's another subject for another day. We're Clemson football. There is going to be a Believe in Clemson basketball podcast coming out later this year too. That's being in the works with my good guy Richmond Weaver, my good friend. So stay tuned for that news as you are gonna have your access.
That news that Will just broke.
Yeah, it's coming. I'm just saying. I talked to Richmond today. It's coming. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. And anyway, but we're going to get back to Clemson football because I could go down this road, and I'll probably go on it later here as I wrote a story about Clemson, about the ACC not getting any respect. Dabo was asked about today at his weekly press conference, so we'll get into that here. But let's get back to football full time. And we're going to talk about Clemson's win. And by the way, if you got some comments, please come on and talk to us. We'll love to get your comments on the air here, and we'll answer your questions. If you have questions, comments, whatever you want to bring to the show, please do. Me and Alex would love to talk to you and bring that on. We're going to have Coach Sweeney on here in a few minutes to talk a little bit about what I mentioned about the ACC and about also this pretty good little linebacker. I don't know if little's the word to use, but this freshman linebacker and how good he is. We'll have that here in just a little bit. But Alex, Clemson 24, Virginia Tech 14. It wasn't that close. Clemson dominated the second half of this football game. Really, the defense, and I knew as soon as I wrote it with about 3 minutes to go in the game, I wrote Virginia Tech's lone touchdown came on a 77-yard block field goal, and I put it in my story. And sure enough, I looked over at a colleague of mine, and I said, I wrote this sentence, and as sure as I did, they're going to allow Virginia Tech to score because I wrote this sentence. And guess what?
So that second touchdown is all
on me.
Will's fault.
It's on me.
But this game really, it took them 2 quarters to shake it off on the offensive side. But let's not act like Clemson didn't move the football in the first half. Clemson found some rhythm, but they had this thing that's happened a few times this year, and that happened against Louisville where they move it to the 40 and stall. Or you get in a field goal range and you get one blocked and take it in for a touchdown. So then you're not going to kick the field goal the next time and don't get it on 4th down. So kind of just like, shooting themselves in the foot there in that first half. But the strength of Clemson really took over in the second half. And I do agree with Brent here. It is notable that Drones and Bashtu both
Tootin.
were Bashtu Tootin, that's his first name. Both were unhealthy. Both were obviously. They didn't use Tootin at all. And they didn't use Tootin at all in the game.
They used him more as like a decoy. They tried to run a lot of. But I'll tell you why, Alex. It was a good performance. Okay, from the defense. I understand Tootin and him weren't 100%, but the week before, they had over 250 yards rushing with those two guys not playing at all. Okay. Yeah. So, in the backup quarterback, you saw what he did when he got in the game. So the fact that their run game was the running backs the week before, they had one running back over 100 yards, had another one with like 50 or 60 yards. They had their quarterback back run for over, 70 or something like that, 50 something yards. So they had success the week before running the ball without those two guys playing. Their offensive line was still intact. It was the same offensive line that has allowed them to rush for 200 yards. So yes, those guys weren't 100% and they weren't much of a factor in the game, but also Clemson's defense did shut down Drones. They were all over him. Drones couldn't do anything. He
ran the ball 11 times for 13 yards.
For 13 yards. And it wasn't like he was like he couldn't move. He could move still. He just was – Clemson was getting after him. Now, it did help that they didn't have to worry about Tootin back there, but there were other running backs, and those other running backs didn't do anything either. And so, and the week before, those guys, as I mentioned, they combined for 250 yards rushing the week before. So it was a good performance. Yes, you pay attention to what happened, who was playing. Yes, you do. But they look like Clemson's defense, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But Brent, appreciate your comments, buddy. Keep on bringing them to us. We'll definitely throw them. Anybody else that's has got some comments, and we got one right here. Our good friend Alan Watts. Are you concerned about Clemson's 6 drop passes that were not on Cade. Alan, this has been a problem for a couple weeks now.
Yep.
Wide receivers dropping passes. If I mentioned it, there's like 4 drop passes in the Louisville game, including one by TJ Moore, where it prevents that block from happening. If he catches it, Clemson goes in and scores because they're at first to goal at the 3-yard line, and they're going in and scoring a touchdown, more than likely there, and going up 14-10 at halftime instead of getting the field goal block, and it sets up Louisville's touchdown just before halftime, and they go 17-7 lead. So, yes, I'm concerned because it's not going away. It seems to keep rearing its ugly head. Antonio Williams, it's contagious. Antonio Williams, second week in a row, he's dropped a touchdown pass.
And Jake Brenningstool, I know
had another drop. Yeah,
he got the game ball for breaking Jordan Leggett's record, but unacceptable for your veteran tight end to have the drops when you need him over the middle. I mean, in some big situations, Clemson had drops, particularly in that first half. That kind of led to a little bit of that, what we're talking about. They moved the ball down the field.
4 of the 6 drops came in the first half. And, you had Brenningstool drop one. You had Moffa drop one. You had, let me see. TJ Moore dropped a touchdown. I mentioned Antonio Williams dropped a touchdown. Antonio Williams dropped a pass that was wide open, and he probably scores on that play. I mean, he's wide open going across the middle. And, so the only guy who doesn't drop one is Troy Stellato, and he's just every time he catches it, he gets drilled.
He gets murdered. I was telling my wife Rachel while we're watching the game after the pass he caught in the middle and got murdered this week. I'm like, man, every time Stellato catches the ball, he gets killed. He must be like talking some smack or something to those linebackers, because it's like he has a big old bullseye on his back when he comes across the middle.
And the funny thing is he's like the least like open of anybody when those balls are thrown, and he catches them every time. And the other guys are wide open, and they're dropping passes sitting wide open in the middle of the field where they can run for days, and they drop them, and he's like sitting there catching it and saying, "Bam!" He's probably over there like, guys, if I could get one that wide open, because the last time he was that wide open was against Wake Forest, and Cade just airmailed it, like threw it to the the guy on the sideline.
Every week in film study, Troy Stellato sitting in there like, Cade, throw me the ball when I'm open. I mean, I'll catch it if I'm not open, but throw it to me when I'm open. I want to score too. Like, I don't want to just die every time I catch the football. I mean, I want to make it through the year.
Absolutely. John Grant, he mentions that, hey, I've been saying all year Hampton should be playing instead of Lucas. And yeah, first of all, shout out to the Clemson freshman that played this week, true freshman. You had Sammy Brown. I mean, just, he mauled it in that game. Then you had on the offensive line, help me out, Alex, true freshman left tackle had to come in and play because 2 guys were out. Elijah Thurman. He came on in and just played as well as you could hope for a true freshman.
I mean, man, he's
the nation's sack leader.
Yeah, matched up against one of the best, if not the best, edge rushers in the country, and took care of business. I mean, locked him down. A guy like that is going to get by you every now and then, because that's just the kind of player he is. But, man, you couldn't have asked for anything better from Thurman in that game. I was thoroughly impressed.
Me too. And then Ashton Hampton, of course, making the highlight reel, making the number 3 play on SportsCenter with the one-handed going back left-handed interception, basically putting his hand in between the hands of the receiver and pulling it out, and having the strength to break the receivers. Where the receiver's got the 2 hands there. I'm doing this. Ashton Hampton's hand's in the middle, and he has the strength to break that up and move it into his arm and over his right arm to secure the interception. It's a heck of a play, dude. One of the best ones I've ever seen. And
you love when he's asked about it by the media. He says, "Oh yeah, I made plays like that all the time in high school."
It's like
he's not like, "Yeah, I surprised myself." It's like, "Yeah, that's what I do. That's who I am."
And
he like to hear from a DB.
he reminds me of Mackenzie Alexander. His level of confidence is what Mackenzie Alexander was, and he talks a lot of trash on the field too. He's right up there talking trash to the receivers. I like it. That's the way it's supposed to be. I like a defensive back who basically acts like Deion Sanders, if you will. when Dion played, and that's what you want from your DBs, right? You want them to be
I
loudmouth and confident.
I like seeing it from our boy Cole Turner in the big situation there. I'm watching the game and I see the linebacker, crept up about to jam him, and I'm like, they better throw the ball to Cole Turner right here. That's a touchdown, no question. Just roast the guy, gets up in his face. Yeah, obviously you don't want to get up in the face after the play and get a penalty, but if you're going to do it in that situation where it doesn't matter, because they need to put some respect on Cole Turner's name. Dude's got wheels.
That's a play he doesn't make last year.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't really physically strong enough to get that kind of separation. But for him to get the separation and then get himself in position to make the play and then fight through and win the battle and make the catch, Cole Turner's grown up. And he grew up a little bit in that. You saw that in that game. And that's good. That's good going down the road for Clemson. Going to start this week because they're going to play a lot of press man this week against this Pitt team. And they're going to have to create separation and get plays down the field. So that's big. But going back to Grant's comment about Ashton Hampton, yes, I'm glad he's part of that three-man rotation. Dabo talked about it today, that he came in for spells for Terrell as well. He wasn't just in there for – because we're all like sitting there like, is something wrong with Terrell? What's wrong with Terrell? And Terrell's sitting over the sideline like, did he get hurt? And we're like, then he came back in. I'm like, okay, I guess he did get hurt. That's the level of confidence that they have in Hampton, that they can take Terrell out and give him a breather and let him, and so you're going to see that three-man rotation. And I know people are hard sometimes on Lucas, but guys, Lucas is the best tackler on that defense. I mean, he makes tackles in the open field nobody else makes.
And he makes up for things. He makes up for things that might be lacking sometimes in his man coverage with the way he's able to tackle, because he can tackle out of position. I mean, he can be in a horrible position when a guy catches the ball and, prevent the big breakaway play. So, I know Jaden Lucas, he doesn't have maybe the same ability as Avion Terrell or Hampton when it comes to man coverage, but the way he's able to tackle is a huge strength in that Clemson secondary.
Exactly. And first of all, it was a bogus penalty that he got called for. That was just kind of ridiculous. Again, officials – I can go on and on about officiating in the NFL and in college football every week. It's horrible. I don't know why they're not held accountable by the media, allow the media to just roast them.
And then when somebody tries to hold them accountable, like the Utah athletic director, you get hit with a fine as big as a lot of our salaries.
Like, why can't we talk? And here's the thing: I was telling this to my brother the other day. Why can't we talk about officials? And stuff. Why can't coaches talk about them and players talk about them? Because it's not like they're volunteers, guys. They're getting paid like $100,000 a game. Okay, I know NFL officials are making over $100,000 a game. I think college officials are making pretty darn good too. So, come on, they're making pretty darn good money. They're making way more than any of us listening to this podcast and watching this podcast and doing this podcast. Okay.
And if they're not making more than somebody who's listening to this podcast, we would love for you to be a sponsor of the show. And
absolutely. That's my point. It's like, okay, they're getting paid just like now the players are getting paid, and we hold the players now more accountable than ever before in college football. The coaches are always held accountable. It's time to start. When the referees blow it, when they make a horrible call, they need to be ripped for it. It needs to be fair. They're not volunteers anymore. This ain't like, well, oh my gosh, we shouldn't do that because they're giving their time. No, they're not giving their time. They're getting paid for their time. So, no, I'm sorry. This isn't church league refereeing. This isn't little league refereeing. This isn't even high school refereeing. This is big boy stuff. And they need to be held accountable for it just like everybody else does. That's getting paid to do this. So I'm just tired of the bad officiating, man. It's just across the board. It's just horrible.
Yeah. And I think too, part of it with these leagues getting bigger is you're pulling some officials up from other levels, or you're pulling guys from the Pac-12 that everybody knew, those guys were awful. You're pulling them into the other conferences. Thank you, JP. Appreciate the comment. You're pulling people from these other conferences that, maybe aren't to the same level as the crews you had when the leagues were smaller. So I think that's part of it why you're seeing more bad officiating in big time college football. But I mean, come on, let's like you're saying, let's hold these guys accountable. If there's a game-altering call like Virginia Tech Miami, that currently is the difference between Clemson wearing orange pants this weekend and not. Let's be honest.
Good point, Alex.
Calls like that, these guys should be answering questions from the media like everybody else has to after a football game.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan Watts says, hope defense stays with the 3 linebacker set and Brown. He led the team with 8 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for a loss, actually, Alan. I asked Dabo Swinney about that today. Would he actually be in the 4-3 defense this week? And Dabo, was kind of, straightforward about it, basically saying, I don't know, because it depends on what Pittsburgh's doing. I think Dabo's playing a little coy because Pittsburgh's watching this. He doesn't want to tip his hat. I understand that, but I have to ask the question because guys like you, Alan, are asking me, are they gonna play the 4-3 again because they did it so well? They looked so good last week doing it. And Sammy Brown, but he did say, I want Sammy Brown to stay, Alex, on the field. That's important to them. Yeah,
absolutely. And here's what Dabo had to say about Sammy Brown.
Based on what they do, I mean, they're an all 11 personnel team. I think they've I don't know, very, very few snaps of 12. It's mostly all 11 personnel. But, we'll see how it is situationally. And he's certainly got to have opportunity to play. And he's earned that and will continue to do that. And it's just really created some great depth there. We really feel good about, where we are. We felt great coming into the season with Kobe. Kobe was really our third guy and really ready to play. Sammy wasn't quite there. And man, now where we are, we feel good about where we are depth-wise because D. Creighton has really improved. He's a redshirt freshman. He's really improved. Jamal has improved. You haven't seen it quite as much on the field. And Sammy has just, as the game has slowed down for him, he's just taken off and has done such an awesome job. He's in a really good place. So we feel good about our group, especially when we get Kobe back. And then you got, next year will be a much more veteran group with D and Jamal and Kobe and Sammy and Woodaz back. And then we've redshirted a couple guys. We redshirted, Drew Woodaz, and then we redshirted Cooper Taylor. And, and where we are now with 3 games left, we got a bunch of guys that are now available, that have played 1 game that we've saved that can give us some depth on some special teams down the stretch here, which will be good. But those 3 guys, Sammy and Barrett and Woodaz, it's nice to have some really, really functional depth, down the stretch here.
That's Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney talking about Sammy Brown and the depth of defense and at linebacker. And I want to talk about Sammy Brown. I mean, as I said right there, my little headline right there, Sammy Brown was a beast. And Alex, he was a beast the other day. He's so fun to watch, dude. I haven't had this much fun watching a linebacker play the way he plays since a guy named Keith Adams Sr. was a linebacker at Clemson. Okay. I mean, he plays with that kind of tenacity and intensity. And not that the guys, obviously, we've had at Clemson plenty of great ones that have come through in the last 25 years. Don't get me wrong. But Keith Adams had that knack for just being able to disrupt everything in the backfield. And every time the ball snapped and he was in the game, he was in the backfield making a play. That is Sammy Brown. And Sammy's just a little bit bigger version of Keith Adams. Man, he flies everywhere. He's the fastest linebacker I've ever seen with his speed. It's so obvious how fast he is. He can get sideline to sideline, but he just gets upfield and just create. His instincts are so natural that even though he's not doing what he's supposed to do, he's still making a play.
Well, I wanted to point out a little bit of his football IQ on that sack. The way he was shading the tackle almost like he's in a spy, kind of hiding himself from drones before he, pops up around the tackle, makes a sack. And those are things that you just don't see from a freshman. I mean, let's be honest. Most freshmen run into the tackle and get locked up there and get kind of flushed to the inside, but he's able to kind of work his angle and hide from the quarterback to come out and make a surprise sack. And that was where I really saw that football IQ kind of shine through. But you talk about his natural instincts, the way he's able to fill holes in run fits, the way he's able to just know where the play's going based off what the offensive line does in a split second. those are the things that get you really, really excited about the future with big number 47 back there.
He is, man, and he's just so fun to watch. He really is, and he was a difference last week. He was, and you knew if you got him on the field, and it was sort of like Dabo kind of had an ultimatum, like 47 is going to get on the field. You got to figure a way to do it, and he kind of said that today. If you go back and listen to those comments where he says, basically, he's too good and he's earned the right.
He's earned the right. He's earned his playing time.
He's earned his playing time, so they got to find a way to get him on the field. So what does that mean, Alex? Well, I'll tell you what this means. It means you're going to see Clemson in a 4-3 this week, but it's going to look like a 4-2. And what I mean by that is they're going to, because Wade Woodaz is so athletic and you can use him in different ways. Wade could play that as he did in this game against Virginia Tech at times. He can play that nickel position, or if you just want to get creative, as they did during this game, and I give Wes Goodwin total credit for this, you push Wade Woodaz back and play him more of a safety role, playing middle field, playing center field, and you put Khalil Barnes at the nickel, and you got Khalil playing the nickel there. So they were kind of creative in how they used that and how they used 47, because they just don't want it to be seen, oh, and 47's on the field, they're only doing this. They showed some different looks on how they use Wade Woodaz, how they're using the other players on the field at safety and stuff. And that's what they got to do this week against Pitt, because as Dabo says, Pittsburgh runs a lot of 11 personnel. So what people don't understand what that means they got one running back, one tight end. And so they're going to spread you out basically. Virginia Tech was a lot of 12 personnel. They had two tight ends. So, that's a little bit different. So they're going to see a little bit different scheme, but you can figure a way to keep 47 out there. And I think you're going to see that this week.
And give Wes Goodwin credit for, going back to the drawing board after the way things looked on run defense against Louisville and figuring out a way to scheme to his personnel. It wasn't just like he said, guys, this is what we're doing. I've come up with my brain trust. He schemed to his personnel.
He did.
Put his guys in the best spot to make plays. And again, I still am a little baffled by the way that Virginia Tech approached the game offensively. I just don't understand why they didn't have more straight handoffs.
I think Virginia Tech they thought Clemson was going to be more in that 4-2-5.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that they weren't, being all that was coming out of Clemson and how everybody was talking about they need to go to 4-3, that they didn't work on the 4-3 a little bit more.
Well, they didn't watch the Believe in Clemson football podcast.
They obviously did.
Will Vandervoort changed Clemson's defensive scheme in a night.
Yes, they weren't paying attention, because it's like they just didn't seem like they were ready for Clemson to be in the 4-3. They kind of tried to do some things Stanford did and what Louisville did, and Clemson was ready because what the base defense they were using allowed them to be ready. I also want to give credit to a couple guys. I thought Lawson played his best game as a Clemson Tiger last week, and I think that needs to be noted about how he played. Some other guys, I think TJ Parker, because Lawson was playing well, TJ Parker was able to be there. And then Alex, this is why I say Clemson's defense looked like Clemson's defense, because they were in the backfield almost every play. They dominated that Virginia Tech offensive line, a very good and experienced veteran Virginia Tech offensive line. They dominated them, and it wasn't even close how well they dominated them.
And the Clemson defense, to your point about, Jaheim Lawson, they just looked incredibly disciplined. Like in some areas where it looked like they were getting frustrated and lacked in their technique because of frustration against Louisville, that wasn't the case this past weekend. They looked extremely disciplined. Guys were doing their jobs. The play I pointed out earlier about Wade Woodaz, the discipline in keeping a check on drones. Drones tried to scramble. They tried to run draw. They tried to scheme things up for him to get him in space. And the discipline of Clemson's defensive front and Sammy Brown really prevented that from being an issue in the game. Their scheme kind of reminded me a lot more of what Stanford tried to do against Clemson than what Louisville tried to do against Clemson, where the quarterback is your primary weapon in the run game. And you let the receivers run the DBs away and try to get to the second level. And Clemson just didn't allow them to get to the second level.
They didn't. And Jaheim Lawson really did a good job setting the edge. And that's what was missing in that Stanford game and against Louisville. They didn't have anybody setting the edge over there. And kudos to him. Kudos to the Clemson defense. It was an impressive performance, without a doubt, their best of the year. Now, Dabo was funny on Sunday night during his teleconference with us. He says, hey, the only thing that was disappointed about last night is we just can't get the quarterback down. Like we should have had 6 sacks, Dabo was talking about. Now, they got robbed of 1 sack when T.J. Parker stripped the football from Drones. That was a sack. He was behind the line of scrimmage, and it was a run option play, and so a run pass option. And they said like he was running the ball. No, he was running the ball because Clemson's defensive line just collapsed it, and he had no choice but to run the ball. I mean, and so that should have been a sack there with his fumble, but they didn't give it to him. They the home team cooking. They just made it a tackle for a loss. The stat crew there. So you get that from time to time, but they should have had 6 sacks. Dabo's right. They were back there all night, and they were just like this close, and they would just get the pass off or just scramble off to the left just a little bit. But they were pressuring them. I would like to look at the true pressures because the guys that do the stats in the press box don't really understand what pressure is. It's hard to do when you're up high like this and you're trying to watch the yards and the line of scrimmage and all.
Well, it's also hard in this age of college football where everything's an RPO and
right.
You're running these one-step drops.
So what's a true quarterback pressure, right? But so it's hard for people to get it. So but when you talk to the quarterback, when you talk to the coaches, they'll tell you what a pressure is and what it looks like and how many they had. And Clemson had a ton the other night, a ton of quarterback pressures. The defensive line really got after him more than what the stats will show.
And Clemson was opportunistic in the secondary because of it. Because you were causing the pressures, the ball was put in harm's way, and Clemson was opportunistic and forced the turnovers that were necessary to keep the game moving along. When the offense was stalling or the offense needed the defense to pick them up, they were able to do it. Saw a lot of complimentary football in the second half, which you saw none of in the Louisville game. And let's be honest, it'd been lacking a few times in the season, even in some lopsided games, but you saw a lot of complimentary football in the second half, which is a huge positive.
And that kind of the good leeway, Alex, and to talk about the Tigers have to get better on offense. It's becoming a pattern now where they're struggling in the first half. I think we go back to
Wake Forest. I think he started at Wake Forest in the first quarter.
No points against Wake Forest. Then they struggled against Louisville, where they only had 7 points in the first half, none in the first quarter again. And then again this week, shut out in the whole first half. First time since the Georgia game, they got shut out in a half. They got to get better here these next couple of weeks, getting on top first. Not talking about the Citadel game. The Citadel game would be good practice.
But you got 2 weeks. These 2 games against FBS opponents that you have the next few weeks. You can't have slow starts.
You can't.
You have a slow start. Ask Vandy how it feels to get off to a slow start against South Carolina.
Yeah.
And Pitt,
you're working uphill. Ask Oklahoma. Ask anybody that's played South Carolina this year. You don't want to get off. That
wasn't a slow start. That was a disastrous start.
That was a disastrous
I don't think I've seen a team start a game as bad as Oklahoma did when South Carolina came to the Plains. But these are 2 football teams, Pitt and South Carolina, that if you start playing from behind, you could be in a world of hurt against both of those teams. So you got to get things moving early against both of them.
Yeah, Alex, you brought it up. Their defenses, they like to cause chaos.
Yep.
And so you get behind, you get scrambling, you get panicky.
Start pressing.
You start pressing. You fall right into what they want you to do. And they get after you. The kid here that Clemson's going to face this week, number 9, their linebacker for Pittsburgh. We'll get into it in a second. Dude, all he does is cause chaos. And he causes turnovers and everything else. So they got to be careful here these next couple games. So offense has to do better. Now they look good in the second half. Really got going. They came out. I don't know what Dabo said to him at halftime, but he must have laid down the law because they came out and they were a different offense in that second half. Everybody was catching everything. Everybody was blocking. Everybody was not, getting stupid sacks.
Man, look at the downfield blocks by the receivers in the second half. If you think that there wasn't something said at halftime, all you got to do is look at how those receivers were blocking downfield in the second half, and you will know that the law was laid down at the break.
Absolutely. And, so they look good. 24 unanswered points there in the second half to take a 24-7 lead. Kate Klubnik doing his best Doug Flutie impression where he's like, getting knocked to the ground, looks like he's just going to get leveled off. And by the way, I want to talk about that because Dabo mentioned today that Cade Klubnik played his worst game of the year as a quarterback. Worst game of the year. He took 4 sacks. That was like, he's got to do a better job in that. He didn't always make the right decisions throwing the football. And so Dabo talked about that today. He wasn't as accurate at points in this game. But what Dabo did like about Cade was he showed his leadership in this game. When things weren't going well, he found ways to make plays. He found ways to keep his team up and morale up on the sideline. He wasn't falling down. Where a year ago, Clemson loses this game a year ago with that first half performance. Yeah. And by the way, that hit he took where they bring the fire blitz off the edge and the guy just lays into him and he doesn't fall down. That's almost the same play. It was a linebacker, but it's a very similar play. It was a delayed blitz, and he fumbled that play last year, and they scooped and scored. This time he holds onto it, rolls off to his right, and throws a touchdown pass. Difference in Cade Klubnik from last year to this year.
You could see a very clear difference in the demeanor of Cade Klubnik watching the TV cut. I don't know if you went back and got to watch the TV cut.
I did.
From this game. If you watch his demeanor where he's standing there with Dabo when things are going bad and they're like, they're laughing, they're smiling a little bit. I'm sure it drove a lot of you crazy watching at home as it did me, seeing people smiling and laughing when things are going bad. But obviously it made a big difference for Cade Klubnik because you could tell he didn't get tight. He didn't get happy feet. Nope. He didn't start pressing, trying to be a hero. I mean, maybe he was on that one play that we're mentioning. Maybe he was a little bit of a hero there, but it worked out. But you saw him maintain his composure even when things weren't going well. And that's the biggest difference for this offense from last year to this year.
Even last week against Louisville when it goes well, he didn't panic. And that's why he was pissed off, and he used the word pissed off in that post-game press conference against Louisville after the Louisville game because – he's shown his leadership and kudos to him. He's really showing it these last couple of weeks where he was letting everybody know what they did against Louisville was unacceptable. And this ain't happening again. If we play bad, we're going to figure a way to fix it. It's like, this is not how we play and what we do. You like that from your starting quarterback. You like the fact that he's getting after people when he gets onto them and he's not just, buddy with them. He's getting in their face and talking to them. That's what a quarterback's supposed to do. But not doing it like Aaron Rodgers where he throws them under the bus on the red line. But he's you're muted, Alex. You're muted.
Mike Williams didn't need the red line this week. He found the gold line, as Chris Berman aptly said.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I like about Cade. That he's not throwing anybody under the bus, but he's taking care of business as a leader. And he's letting the team know, the offense know, this is unacceptable. We got to be better than this, and we got to get better than this.
Question on this front from Data Racer. So why then isn't Garrett Riley able to get the offense working for 6 quarters if Dabo had to lay down the law? I don't know if I would say that the offense was broken from a coaching standpoint in the first half of the game against Virginia Tech.
Garrett Riley wasn't dropping 6 passes.
I think they schemed it up right and were running the right plays.
Garrett Riley wasn't holding.
Garrett Riley wasn't old. Garrett Riley didn't have a false start. Yeah.
Garrett Riley didn't have a quarterback throwing the ball out of bounds when there was no receiver there, and he getting what's that called? Basically, quarterback throws away illegally.
Intentional grounding.
Intentional grounding.
I heard the second half of what you said. You were like, goes out of bounds.
Throws it out of bounds. Like, intentional grounding there. Man, my brain is not working sometimes.
Captain Obvious.
Garrett Riley didn't do any of those things. I mean, that was all Clemson just shooting themselves in the foot. Those are players not executing is what was going on.
And those are corrections that come from the head coach, 100 out of 100 times. Those aren't corrections that usually come from the coordinators. Coordinators are especially on offense, are confidence givers, and the criticism usually comes from up top on that side. Defense is a little different. There's just criticism all the way around. Not much picking yourself up on that side of the ball. But that's kind of what I would say to that. I don't think that the scheme was bad in the first half. I really didn't. There might be some things that were frustrating, but it's kind of there's some things that are frustrating about an air raid offense, especially when it's not going well. It's going to be frustrating. That's kind of the nature of the beast.
Well, the thing I liked about this week, Alex, is that it didn't go well. That things didn't go right in the first half. That Virginia Tech's defense was dictating things at times. And you lost your starting left guard before the game. You lost your starting left tackle during the game. In the first couple series, all these things are going against you. Yet you come back and you take over the game in the second half. That's a good sign going forward, because we just talked about who you're going to play here this week and a couple weeks from now against South Carolina. You're going to play defenses that play like that are going to try to dictate things, that are going to be up in your face, and they're going to make things go bad, and things are going to look bad. You got to be able to handle that adversity, get through it. The fact that Clemson showed that they can handle that adversity now and then find success later on, that's big going forward, because Clemson's got a defense that I think, as long as the offense doesn't allow the other team, or the special teams for Clemson's case this year, doesn't allow the other team to have short fields and to change the game with game-changing plays that put the defense in bad situations. I think the defense has been, for the most part, pretty good. Teams have to go a long way to drive. Last week saw it against Virginia Tech. I think if the defense can do what they did there and make teams have to drive the length of the field and score instead of having that big play like Louisville got a couple times, you eliminate those big plays, then the offense just don't put pressure on your defense, right? And then you'll figure things out on offense. Keep it at 7-0. Keep it at 0-0.
Well, here's the thing too. Even when things weren't going well on the offensive side, they weren't just going 3 plays and punt. They were keeping the defense off the field. In the Louisville game, that didn't happen. You punted after 3 plays instead of driving the ball 40 yards, and your defense stayed on the field for essentially 10 minutes.
Right.
And then they were slap wore out by the second quarter, and things kept getting uglier and things spiraled. The offense being able to drive the ball in that first half, even when they didn't get points, that helped the defense out a great deal.
And overall,
Virginia Tech. So.
And we'll get into it here in a second. Overall, the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks, Clemson's got the better offense the next couple weeks. And so they just have to – they're going to have to roll – they're going to have to press through the adversity they're going to get in those games and try to come out on the other side on top, because – and that's where the key is going to be, like just enough to keep your defense rested so your defense can keep things, because South Carolina doesn't scare me offensively other than their quarterback running the football.
And he's going to turn the ball over at least once.
I mean, let's be honest. Clemson's going to be the best secondary he's seen.
Yes.
I mean, they really are. They're going to be the best secondary he's seen. Clemson's probably going to have the best linebackers he's seen. Now, the front four has been the question for Clemson, which is surprising. That's what I'm saying, where the problem lies, because it's been Clemson's strength for so long. But the front four, when we get into that game, break it down, that's where South Carolina has an advantage and where Clemson is not as good. But if Clemson can stir that up, they're going to be fine because of where they are on the back end of the defense.
And we'll talk a lot more about South Carolina over the next couple of weeks.
Right.
But the other thing that concerns me for the front four against South Carolina is, Rocket Sanders is going to get to the second level. I mean, it's what he does. He hits the hole so hard that he's going to get to the second level. But you can't make things easy for him. You got to make him go through his own linemen. You got to close those gaps when you face a guy like that. And it's hard to do with gap integrity with Lenore Sellers too. So,
yeah, I totally agree. Alex, we need to just kind of flip over and we'll talk a little bit about the next thing before we get into Pitt preview. Want to go ahead. Clemson's path to an ACC championship. I know last week we were like, it's dead. There is no path.
I still am a little less optimistic than you on this front.
Right, but we said, but I did say one thing last week. I said, if Clemson's going to have an opportunity, this has to happen.
Yep.
Georgia Tech has to beat Miami.
Yep.
That has to happen this week. If not, Clemson doesn't have a chance to get there.
And I just want to sing Haynes King's. I want to sing Haynes King's praises again this week. I mean, every time I watch that dude, he might not be the fastest. He might not be the strongest. He might not have the best arm. I mean, he couldn't hardly use his arm on Saturday. But that dude is just a baller. I mean, he's just a gamer. He's going to make plays.
He's hurt, man.
He's a tough son of a gun. And, man, he kind of embodied the style of football that his coach likes to play with. Mm-hmm. And, man, that guy was fun to watch on Saturday in that game.
He was, and Georgia Tech got bowl eligible for a second straight year. Again, with the roster that they have no business doing what they did, beating a team like Miami. But their quarterback is the reason why. They got some playmakers on offense, and their defense just plays with a tremendous amount of heart. They really do.
Yeah.
They're not very good on defense, but man,
No, they're not.
They just play with reckless abandonment, and they just don't care,
Yeah.
And
their
go
coach,
after
and to Georgia Tech's credit, they got a defensive coordinator that puts them in good position.
He does.
So
He does.
they're in a position to make plays. Now, are they talented enough to stay in position most of the times? No,
Right.
but they overcome it with their tenacity and their toughness.
Absolutely. So Georgia Tech did the first thing. They beat Miami and gave Miami that loss. Now here's what's got to happen. A couple scenarios. All right, I'm going to give you the least likely scenario first. Then I'm going to give you the second scenario and then the third, okay, which is probably the best
the third is the most likely.
Most likely. So I'm going to start off with the least likely scenario. The least likely scenario is Miami wins out, Clemson wins out, SMU loses to Virginia, Virginia then beats Virginia Tech, and then Louisville loses to Pitt and loses at Stanford. If those things happen and Clemson beats Pitt, that's the number one thing that has to happen. Clemson's got to beat Pitt. If those things happen, Clemson's in the ACC championship.
Yeah,
that's the least likely thing that's going to happen because there ain't no way Virginia might possibly win out. That might happen. I think that could happen because they get SMU at home and Virginia. And SMU has shown a propensity to almost lose games already this year. We saw it against Duke. And Virginia is real physical and can get after you. And you turn the ball over like that, Virginia's going to beat you. However, Louisville's not losing to Stanford. That's not happening. Louisville could lose to Pitt, but they're not losing to Stanford. That's not happening. So, and the reason I said that's part of the scenario, because in that scenario, Virginia would finish 5-3 in the ACC. Louisville would finish 4-4, and Clemson would win the better team finishing in the standings, a common opponent, which would be Clemson losing to, which would be Virginia. And both of them played Louisville. Both of them would have played Virginia. And Clemson would have had Virginia finishing behind Louisville would give Clemson the edge. So that's why. So anyway, that's the least likely scenario. Now, the second scenario is SMU loses to Virginia and SMU loses another game.
Yeah,
which they got Boston. They got Boston College. Maybe Boston College, but
if Thomas Castellanos is being Thomas Castellanos,
there's a chance.
There's a chance. But if Thomas Castellanos is being, Tommy Can of Corn or whatever, like he's been a couple times this season, then
there's no chance.
Likely. Yeah.
Right. So you got to get a Boston College, got to go to SMU and beat them this week. I think this week, and then they got to lose to at Virginia next week. If those two things happen. Like this week, if Boston College beats them, then you're going into next week like, oh man, does Wake Forest?
Oh my goodness!
Does Wake Forest beat Miami, or does SMU lose to Virginia? So that's the second. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think Boston College is going to go to SMU and win. I don't think they got enough.
If it was in Boston, I would feel a lot better about that possibility. But I don't think they're going to lose to. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think so either. But anyway, that's what's got to happen. That's scenario number 2. Then there's scenario number 3, which of all of them is the most likely that could happen. Again, Clemson's got to beat Pitt. That's the first thing that has to happen this week. Then Miami has to lose one of their next 2 games, which they host Wake Forest. They're off this week. They host Wake Forest next week, and then they go to Syracuse to end the season. To the house, what's called the House of Nightmares, and the Dome in Syracuse. So,
and Fran Brown, he said he's not showering this week because they lost. So he's very committed to going out and winning these games. He's committed to the point where he's going to stink up the facility.
Wow, that's kind of bad.
It's kind of gross.
That's kind of gross. So, like Wake Forest, I don't think Wake Forest goes to Miami and wins. So that's not happening. So. Syracuse. I think Syracuse can beat can beat Miami Now, it's going to be a shootout. And because Miami's defense sucks. You saw
Yes.
how wide open those receivers were for Georgia Tech. And
Yep.
it's not like those are unbelievable wide receivers at Georgia Tech. They got one good guy that's really good.
And
The rest
Kyle
of them, though.
McCord can make the throws.
Yes.
I know he had the game that must not be named when he went to Pitt.
Right.
But Kyle McCord can make the throws.
And by the way, Pittsburgh's defense, I think, is better than Miami's defense overall. So, I mean, Miami's defense is horrible. I mean, they're giving up like 40 points a game in ACC play. I mean, in over 450 yards in ACC competition. They're horrible. They are not good as a defense. And they also struggling to run the football. And that allows me to say, okay, well, Syracuse ain't very good on defense either. But Syracuse has gotten physical at times. They got physical against Georgia Tech. They got physical a few weeks ago against Virginia Tech and found a way to come back to win that game. I got a little bit of hope there, Alex. First of all, Clemson's got to take care of their business and win and then get themselves in position. Because, by the way, folks, so you guys know, this only matters with ACC competition. What happens non-conference does not matter in any of these scenarios. It's only ACC competition. So there's a, as the great Jim Carrey says, so you're saying there's a chance,
It does seem like kind of a Dumb and Dumber chance to me. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen.
But one thing's already happened.
One thing has happened. But
you didn't think Georgia Tech was going to win, did you? You didn't.
I thought Georgia Tech could win. Georgia Tech could win if Haynes King played, and he played.
But
and 90% Jamal Haynes played, and Jamal Haynes played for 2 series, but he had a big touchdown run in that. I thought that was the most likely team that Miami would lose to, and I just don't see Miami. I just don't see Miami losing to Syracuse. Now, here's how it could happen, though. Yeah, that's great, Thomas.
Luckily, they don't play.
There's one scenario.
Well, no, they don't play this week. He's taking a break from football this week, so maybe he's back next week. Anyway,
benched and taking a week away. Good to know.
Castellanos. Oh, that's not. That's
Boston College.
That's Boston College, not Virginia. That's Calandria.
Well, that's your least likely scenario.
So if Castellano is not playing this week, yes, you're correct. Boston College has no chance to win in the second scenario. That's the second scenario.
So maybe that makes the second scenario the third scenario.
That makes them both just go away. That's what happens.
Yeah, so basically, there's one scenario that Clemson can make it. And now here's the way that it could happen with Miami going to Syracuse. The way that this could happen is Miami goes out.
Well, Cal could beat SMU too, though.
Yes,
that's possible. Cal's good enough on defense.
Well, let's say Miami goes into that Syracuse game and they came out and just whooped Wake Forest ass the week before, and they're riding high. They're like, "Oh, Georgia Tech was an apparition. That's not going to happen again. We're already in the ACC championship. We're thinking about the playoff. We're looking at these other games and thinking about these other games." If Miami goes into the Syracuse game with that mindset, then I feel good about your possibility. Now, if Miami struggles and finds a way to squeak one against Wake Forest and is thinking, "Oh, we need to make some adjustments going up to Syracuse," then I think your scenario becomes even more unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you want Miami to beat the tar out of Wake Forest, and you want them to feel like there's no problems when they go up to Syracuse.
Here's the thing: could Wake Forest do the unthinkable though? Dave Clawson's a good football coach. Listen, let me just throw this out. Let me throw this out. Dave Clawson is a better football coach than Mario Cristobal. And it's not even close. A game day coach, it's not even close how good Dave Clawson is compared to Mario Cristobal, okay?
Yeah.
Not even close. Miami's problem is what? Defense, right?
Yeah.
Now, Wake Forest has problems on defense too.
And critical, and a lot of Miami's problems too are coaching decisions.
What did Wake Forest do last week, though, that gives you a little bit of hope? They scored 30-something points against Cal's defense.
Yeah.
A very good Cal defense. That's really – Cal's problem this year has not been its defense. It's been its special teams and offense, okay?
Yeah.
So, Miami struggled moving the football against Cal's defense. Wake Forest didn't. Wake Forest didn't, okay? Miami can't play defense. It's going to be nobody there in Coral Gables because they don't care.
Nobody's ever there. They could be
It's
number
like a
one
high
in the
school
country,
game.
and there'd be 16 people there.
It's like
Which
a high school game.
I was
I mean,
a
it
little
could happen.
surprised.
I'm not saying, but college football is a strange thing.
I was a little surprised on the Miami front that when they're rolling into Coral Gables to play Duke and they're a top 5 team in the country, I was surprised that nobody was there. I thought that their fans would have woke up to the reality of where they are. But
yeah,
and John, I don't know if I agree 100% with this. I don't think they're an ACC team. They're in the ACC. I mean, what look at a team from your league is making your title game. I don't think that's necessarily
right. And I think he's saying because they were a group of 5 last year, but they were like one of the best group of 5 teams in the country.
And they added Power 5 talent in the offseason.
Yeah.
So
don't forget Missouri won the SEC East back-to-back years when they first went to the conference in the SEC. So if an SEC fan wants to come at you with that, you just say Missouri. That's all you got to say to them. That'll shut them up. So don't worry about that, buddy. That doesn't matter. Like Alex said, I don't think that matters. Look
what BYU is doing in the Big 12. I mean, they're a member of the league is making the title game. I don't think that's.
But more importantly, look at Colorado's doing as a member of the Big 12.
Yeah,
like Colorado's horrible.
Colorado, who me and Will bet our houses on, having 4 wins this year. Is probably going to the Big 12 title game.
Yeah, I mean, and they're look. The kudos to Deion Sanders doing a good coaching job. Don't get me wrong,
and he has done a hell of a coaching job. The coordinators that he put in place have made a
difference.
Pile of poop, a title contender.
Exactly.
In their conference.
But they're still not a good team. If you look at the lines of scrimmage, they're masking things. They're getting through it. They're coaching them up, getting through some things, but they're not very good. Colorado's not good. When they play a team with any kind of pulse, that's really talented, elite level team, they're going to get handed to them. They better hope they don't win because they're going to get embarrassed in the college football playoff if they do.
Oh, yeah.
They'll get embarrassed because they're not good at the lines of scrimmage. And when you play an elite team in that kind of environment, in that kind of game, that's going to show up. And so, we'll see. But SMU, you know what they are good at, Alex? They are good at the lines of scrimmage.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I said. They acquired Power 5 talent. To compete at the Power 4 level,
and they got a good coach who's very offensive minded and very creative, and they got something that a lot of teams in the ACC don't have.
Money.
And right now, the name of college football, if you got this, you're going to be successful. So get used to seeing SMU playing and being in contention for ACC championships.
Because this is not an apparition.
This is not
an apparition. They're going to be.
They're going to pay. They're going to buy the best players. They're going to buy the best players money can buy. They are, because why?
Good for them. Good for them.
Alex, they said that we don't need your revenue money. We're fine. Just let us in the conference so we can go, so we can play in the tournament. Just let us in so we can play. We're fine. We don't need it for 5 years. We're good. That's when a team tells you we're good. When it comes to that, they don't need that money. You know who does need that revenue money? Clemson. Clemson needs it. Clemson can't say we're good. We're fine. Clemson can't do that, people. SMU can. Yeah. That tells you the kind of money they have. By the way, I did find out last week that SMU, if they do go to the college football playoff, they will get that money. It's the TV revenue share they won't get, but they will get the college football playoff. Yeah. What's it called? Incentive deal stuff that the ACC is allowed. They will get that. So anyway. Real fast, Alex, we got to get to the Pittsburgh game. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Clemson at Pitt, noon kickoff. The field is going to be very thick because I just put this thought together, Alex, today.
There's enough time.
Who are the Steelers playing on Saturday?
The Ravens.
Who's the fastest quarterback in the world?
Oh, shoot. Lamar Jackson.
So guess what the field's going to look like both days?
It's going to look the same way it did a few weeks ago.
It's going to look like crap.
Why couldn't they be playing the Bengals or the Browns? Why are they going to play Lamar Jackson? Now the grass is going to be, up to your knees.
It's going to be this tall.
Phil Maffa's going to have 6-inch spikes on his cleats. He better, because sometimes he slips on carpet.
Did you see how bad that field looked Thursday? What night? Friday night or whatever night it was they were playing.
Yes.
That was Virginia on Saturday night. You see how bad it looked? I mean, it looked awful. That field did. I mean, it looked like I was playing. They were playing in my backyard. I
It
mean,
looks
that's
like
how
what
bad it looked.
like Purdue used to do, where they got grass that swallows your foot when you step in. It reminds me of a high school game I played at Southside. High school game I played at Southside in October, and I tripped 5 times trying to get on the field because the grass was so high.
And Alex, guys, he played wide receiver, had this blazing speed on the outside.
Yeah, and it's because they wanted to slow me down. They didn't call me White Lightning for no reason. They'd slow me down.
So anyway, pay attention to the field when Clemson plays up there this week. It might come into play because obviously Clemson's got, Bryant Westco, they got Troy Stellato, they got Turner. They got all the. Now Moffa will be okay because he's a mutter. Moffa will be fine, but Antonio Williams, this could really slow down Clemson's outside play with the receivers. It'll be interesting to see. But at least Clemson does have a mutter, and that's where Pittsburgh. When I look at this game, they haven't played anybody like Phil Moffa in the run game. They haven't, and I think Clemson can, because what Pittsburgh's doing this year is they're blitzing their linebackers more right up the middle. As I was talking about earlier with number 9, they bring him straight up to the line, and they want him to just create chaos. And that's cool. But this is the first time in a few years where Pittsburgh really doesn't have that dominant defensive tackle that just takes over the game, that Aaron Donald kind of player, And I think Clemson can run up the middle against this team. Now, Dabo mentioned how they're only giving up 109 yards a game rushing. They're ranked 19th in the country in rushing. But that's because teams get behind and they have to pass.
Yeah.
I watched Virginia. I watched Kobe Pace, who basically is Phil Moffa 2.0. And he ran right in the middle on them in that game the other night, And so Virginia was able to get physical and control the line of scrimmage in that game. I think Clemson can do that too from an offensive standpoint. I think this game is going to be a Phil Moffa kind of game. And because I think as I just mentioned earlier, they're gonna grass is gonna be tall and wet, and they're gonna make sure that the Clemson can't get their speed on the outside.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And then kind of looking at Pitt on the other side of the ball, I think they're going to try to do more what Louisville tried to do than what Stanford tried to do, because they got the little scat back type running back in Desmond Reed, the Western Carolina transfer, 5'8", 175. This isn't going to be an Eli Holstein running game. This is going to be a steady dose of Desmond Reed.
First of all, Eli Holstein may not even play. He's questionable for this game with a concussion. Yeah. So they might be with their backup quarterback. His backup quarterback's name is who, Alex? You got that there?
That's Yarnell.
Who's
Nate
former
Yarnell.
West. You want to know who he is? He was Cade Klubnik's backup his senior year. Because Cade Klubnik came and took the job from him.
There's going to be a little bad blood in Pittsburgh on Saturday and Sunday.
His backup in high school, he's from Westlake as well as Cade Klubnik is.
Yep.
So anyway, the running game for Pitt is the key to this game. And that's why I think you see Clemson come out in a 4-3. I think that their 3 linebackers are on the field because it's going to be like, guys, the one guy ain't going to beat us is that guy. We've already lost that game this year because of a guy like that. Not going to do it again. Now, here's the thing with Reed, though, where he's different than what Louisville did. They use him in the screen game. Yeah, they will screen you to death at Pittsburgh. They'll get all those. They just let everybody fire through, and then they just drop it off. And they got the big uglies out in front.
Another positive from this Virginia Tech game that makes you feel good going into Pitt is we talked about the discipline in the screen game. Clemson was incredibly disciplined in the screen game. They weren't going to let Virginia Tech neutralize the linebackers with those screens. And Clemson was incredibly disciplined, which is something that it's been a couple years now where Clemson's looked undisciplined against the screen game. Right. And they looked extremely disciplined against it in Blacksburg. So you hope that carries over when you're trying to stop a guy that once he gets into space can turn on the afterburners.
Yeah, I don't want to see a Barrett Carter versus Reed on the wheel route matchup. Okay, I don't want to see that.
I don't want to see that at all. No. Maybe Woodaz. Maybe I want to see Woodaz.
Maybe Woodaz on that one. I do not want to see that matchup, but that's the matchup they're going to try to get. They're going to try to scheme that matchup up and try to get that to happen. And if they do, hold your breath. Because I as I look at this game, I think Clemson can be physical with Pitt. And the one thing I can tell you about Pitt with Pat Narduzzi, they're going to be physical. And that's what they did to Syracuse, where you watch that Syracuse game. I'm sure a lot of people watched it on here. They just made Syracuse have to play ugly, and they got physical with them. And Syracuse is not a physical team. They're a very finesse team right now. I know that ain't what they want to be. They were able to be physical against Georgia Tech. And don't come at me. I know
they don't have the Jimmies and Joes to be a physical
right. But Pittsburgh got real physical with them, and they just couldn't handle it. Clemson can handle it. Clemson's very physical up front on the defensive line and on offensive line. And you heard Narduzzi this week talk about how physical they were. Alex, he said this is the most physical offensive line he's seen at Clemson. And you know what? I'm with him. I haven't seen a Clemson offensive line this physical since Danny Ford. I really haven't. This might be the most physical offensive line Clemson's had in decades. And then I didn't say they're the best offensive line. I just said the most physical. Yeah. And that's Matt Luke. That's his style. That's what he wants. He's going to say, hey, look, one thing's going to be certain. After you get done playing us, your guys on the defensive line are going to have to go in the ice bath. They're going to be hurting. You're going to know you played Clemson's offensive line. And so that's going to be the thing. That offensive line and Phil Maffa are the key to this week's game. It's going to be a mutter because Pittsburgh's going to, even though the weather's beautiful in Pittsburgh, but Pat Narduzzi's already out there right now. Got the sprinklers on at Acrisure Stadium. The sprinklers are on. The grass is growing, and it's going to be muddy.
Hey, and we hope we see another mutter on Sunday up there.
I do,
because you're going to have to watch out for a lot of these on Sunday.
Yeah, baby.
Pittsburgh. And I know Will's going to be there, and he's going to be like a kid in a candy store. When are you going up there? When are you heading up to Pittsburgh?
Heading up Thursday. So that way Friday, we got all day Friday to to kind of look around. Going to go see the Hall of Honors. If you're a Clemson fan and you're coming up for the game with Pitt, go to the Pittsburgh's Hall of Honors. They're going to be giving the tours, and go check that out. You can go see the Vince Lombardi trophies. There's 6 of them, Alex. 6 of them. And, go check those out. It's pretty cool to go look at those. This is the 50th anniversary of the Steelers' first Super Bowl title. So you can go check that out. Have a little fun while you're there, and stay for the game if you want to. You don't have to be a Steelers fan to stay for the game. It's going to be Pittsburgh versus the Ravens. First place at stake in the AFC North Division. Lamar Jackson, you've seen a lot of that.
Patrick Queen's going to be ready, boy.
Patrick Queen, he's ready for him. Man, he played a heck of a game the other day. I hope he's as pissed off as he was against the the Commanders, because he was mad in that game. So it's going to be fun, man. I got Clemson on Saturday. Going to cover that game. It's going to be a hard slobber knocker kind of game, I think. And then you're going to get a hard slobber knocker Steelers-Ravens game the next day. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to coming back, Alex, 2-0. Coming back to South Carolina 2-0, man. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That'd be great. And I'll be watching both the games from my couch, wishing I was there with you.
I wish you were too, man. It'd be fun, man. It would be fun. And hey, if you guys are coming up, man, let us know. Tell us you're coming up to Pittsburgh, and let's try to say hey or whatever. So if you are coming up, hope you have a great trip. If not, go to the Clemson Insider. You can find out all the details before and after, leading up to the game. You can find all the information you want on this game with Pitt. So anyway, for Dabo Sweeney, for Alex Dodd, I'm Will Vandervoort. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll talk to you next time on Believe in Clemson Football.